to Soul Hacks, and welcome to this next episode in my welcoming series. As you can hear, I'm a bit sick. I already apologize. Today's episode will be all about being alone and how I handle it. I don't want to talk around it, or we'll just jump into it. It happens quite often that people come up to me and ask me, how am I handling being alone and spending so much time alone? I can imagine that thinking about being alone, you have this big question, how do I do it? And what do I do when I'm alone? It can be quite scary to think about being alone, but I want to take this fear because being alone is one of the most important things for your own growth, and being happy and content with yourself is the key to everything. I will just talk about my journey of being alone and what I did and what helped me, because especially if you have problems or things you have to overcome, there's always the question, where do I start and how do I start? Even that there's no recipe of how to do it, I will talk about my experience to maybe give you some ideas what you could trying out things, because everyone is different, everyone feels different, and things that work for me doesn't necessarily have to work for you, but it maybe gives you an idea. When I started being alone, that was after my first breakup. I thought I always knew who I am and what I want. But after I finished my uni, I realized that I actually don't know. I always knew who I was and what I want to do, but being surrounded by expectations and our society and what we have to do or should do. So after I finished my uni, I took a gap year, but I was still in my hometown. And it was COVID as well, I think, so bad timing. To have some back informations, I got a burnout in my last uni year. It is so hard to describe it, but everyone experienced that knows how it feels. You're just the shell of yourself. You lose yourself so much and you don't know anymore who you are. After my graduation, obviously I stepped back, even that I love what I did and I love what I've learned, but the last uni year destroyed it quite a lot. And I was like, if I force myself continue doing this, I will ruin it for myself. So I stepped back after my degree and took time for myself to recover and try to find myself again. A few months after, when I went to a retreat, which obviously changed so much and helped me rediscovering myself or listening to my body in a different way. I was so much more aware of knowing that something is wrong just because of my the way I breathe, or my body language, or acknowledging how your body works, because your body sends you signals before you actually know what's wrong. Still in my gap year, trying to recover and finding back to myself. I think I was in therapy at this time, or I think I was in therapy after. The reason that I was in therapy for quite a long time, and I started therapy really young in age, I always focused on myself and knew how to develop and evolve and work on myself. All in all, after the retreat and all in all in the COVID year, I found back to myself. I rediscovered myself in a new way. I learned how to listen to my body, and I was so happy and content with myself in my surroundings. I gave myself the time I needed to heal, reflect, and to rediscover myself, and a completely new horizon opened up, because you think you know who you are and you think you know what you want, but it's always been in the surrounding and the society you're used to. As soon as you step back from it, you have every option. You can go everywhere you want. You can do everything you want. And trying to find yourself in this big horizon is such a big task. And it can be quite overwhelming for sure, because you see the bigger picture and you see life in a different light, and you're just so blown away of the beauty of life and what you can do with your life. So I worked on myself, and as soon as I got very comfortable with who I am and that I knew my hometown is not the place to be for me, I was still very happy and content. And I think that is one big thing I've learned, that it doesn't matter in which surrounding you are, it doesn't matter where you are, if you're happy and content with yourself and within, no one can take that from you. Of course, like being surrounded by people who are not necessarily good for you, of course that has influence, but if that's one of your core character traits, that's your superpower. And the more you stand up for yourself and like manifest that, the stronger you get. I am happy to get out of my comfort zone, and I started doing trips by myself. I spent New Year's in Vienna by myself. Especially this trip to Vienna gave me so much. In the retreat, I switched the way of how I talk, not only talk to myself, but also like just describe things. I changed everything in something good or something changeable. It has such a big influence on your mindset if you stop thinking or speaking in a negative way. So yeah, that helped me loads. I think that is definitely a key moment. Yeah, Vienna is a special memory, for sure. So I became my own person, and I became a whole without actually needing someone to feel as a whole. I find that's like the goal you can have in your life, to become a whole and happy and content with yourself. Of course, it doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey and it takes time and it hurts for sure. You will experience a lot of disappointment. You will experience a lot of pain, but it is so worth in the end. That's also one reason I started a podcast, to like just let people feel less alone, because I always felt alone being in the situation I was in. Even that it was not a present feeling, it was a subconscious feeling. And even that I was in therapy, which helped me big time, that's a feeling that is always there. As I said, I became so independent and a whole, and I had so much trust in myself that I knew everything I will decide to do now, I will handle it. So obviously I went to Sri Lanka, met the Swiss couple, came back and knew I need to go. That is not the place for me to be, and flew to Australia. So in Australia, I traveled with the focus on independence and freedom. I think I always wanted to see how much further I could go with like being alone. So I did most of the things alone. I decided things completely different to everyone else. For example, everyone I knew, I think 90% of the people did the East Coast, like down. As I mentioned in one episode, it is just like so wholesome. It feels like a class, so because you always meet people along the way, and it feels like a secure bubble. Most of the people did that, and I decided not to do it, and I went to Western Australia. I did most of the things alone, and I definitely reached my limits more than once. And more than once I thought, Anna, what are you doing? What the hell? It could be so much easier. Why are you choosing the hard way? But honestly, that's the only way you grow, and I want to grow. I want to grow every single day. I want to be the better version of myself than I was yesterday, because I think that's the purpose in my life. That's what makes life so interesting. Who you are and who do you become. Reaching your limits over and over again lets your mindset expand in such a different way. I can't even describe it. I felt it and I acknowledged it actually in New Zealand, because in Australia I was like 24/7 in survival mode, and I was like to my limits over and over again, but also because I chose to do so. But at the same time, at some point it becomes your normal state, and you become the provider of everything you need for yourself, and you rely only on yourself. As important and powerful that is, it is also really exhausting at some point. I was struggling in Australia. I remember I wrote down how I felt and like reaching my capacity, and always needing to rely on myself and being alone and not having someone, I always overcame the feeling. It makes you so much stronger as a person. I had my downs as well and reached my limits, and with my highly sensitivity, you feel everything so much more intense. I learned to be strong in such a young age, and if I'm crying, then that's a really big thing. Sometimes I felt like I really want to cry. I really want to like leave out the pressure, because you feel so much like lighter after you cried. I was like, most of the time, like, oh no, just please cry. That's how I am, and I'm pretty fine with it. Feeling that not having the people around you need, or not having people in person. Of course, like, I have friends and people I can call, but like, A, it's a completely different time zone. B, they're like in a completely different corner of the world. It's just a different thing to call someone instead of like talking to someone and the person giving you a hug, and just be in the moment. So I had a few moments in a few situations of feeling that way. What do I do when I feel down? What do I do when I feel alone? The first thing I do is acknowledging it, and I accept it. I let it in. I let it come to me, and I feel into the feeling. And even that this can hurt at the beginning, it lets you let go of the feeling way easier. It doesn't bother you anymore. Like, you can accept it and welcome it, and then you let it go away. And after that, or during that, I often did things that are good for myself. Walking along the beach, or feeling the grass underneath my feet, even if that sounds so cheesy. It just like lets you be. That helps me a lot, especially like looking up in the sky and just acknowledging where you are. And it is a state of just being and being in the moment. Everything else, everything that is happening around you or at the moment, doesn't fucking matter in this moment. And that's how I recharge and gain my energy from to keep going and to like solve the problem or the situation. After taking the moment of just being, I always either write about it or I talk to someone to just like say it out loud and to share it, because actually a lot of people feel that way, and I don't expect anyone to solve my problems. I can solve my problems on my own. I just like sometimes need someone that listens, and someone where I can take a break from like my life. We jumped to New Zealand. When my New Zealand time came to an end, I was ready to go home, even that I knew it is not my place to be, and I knew I won't stay there for long. What I take from traveling for the past 2 years was my positivity is my superpower, and even that it takes a lot of energy sometimes in some situations, that's my positivity is what keeps me going in every single situation, because I believe that everything happens for a reason. And even if it's a shitty situation, even if you can't recognize it in the moment, you will see for what it was good for after. It lets you grow. There's no question at all. It's only the question how you deal with it and what you do with it. Nothing that is happening is a bad thing. You can turn it into something good. Of course, like, there are bad things, but like, it's also, in the end, it's up to you what you do with it. One big thing when people ask me what I do to feel better, or like how do I handle being alone, is recharging and knowing what is good for you if you need it or if you don't feel well. And that itself is a whole journey. You have to try things out, you have to figure things out. What helped me back in the COVID year was that I started doing things I enjoyed as a kid. For example, roller skating. I spent so much more time in nature. I always spent time in nature, but more present and more aware. I think that's one big thing, remembering your inner child and taking your inner child with you on your journey, finding yourself and healing yourself. I think that's a big part. There's so many behavior patterns, our childhood and like the way we grew up and the way we face situations or problems. That's definitely a big part. And like there are a lot of good books to read that might help you as well. But yeah, a big thing is like to recharge and to be present. As soon as you start thinking about it, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in your head. So it's harder for you to like start doing it because you don't know how to do it. But if you just start doing things with feeling it, you get there at some point. It will happen naturally. We trick ourselves if we try to understand things, but some things just don't make sense, and they don't have to make sense, but they work for you. Stop thinking about things too much. Just feel more and start. That will be your path. That will be your journey. I think that's how I got to feeling present and being present in the moment. And even that I'm not present 24/7, I acknowledge it and I take my little moments during the day. Everything is okay. Everything will sort itself out. Everything will fall into place. I just have to trust the flow and trust in yourself, and everything will fall into place. That being said, I again have some text I want to read to you. They're probably not like the best the best to end the episode, but it was and is a big part of like traveling alone and reaching your own capacity. And yeah, because I feel like it is very scary for some people to think about being alone and to spend time by themselves, but you can gain so much from it and you can grow so much. It is definitely a big part of like the way I grew up and the things I've had to learn at a very young age, being alone and standing up for yourself and like relying on yourself, just not rely on other people, even if it's sad, but like I know it is a thing for me. And sometimes I had this conversation with a friend. I sometimes found myself thinking of, am I actually still capable of being in a relationship, because I'm so used to being alone and I'm so used to going through things alone. I can give myself a lot of love, but there is something about love from someone else. You can't have one person that gives you everything you need. It's just not possible. You will need to have a few people and different people. Every single one of them will give you something in a different way. If it's a relationship or a friendship, most of us have different friendships with different people. You can't get everything you need from one single person. It is not possible. It's the same with like yourself. Even that you're the only person you wake up with every single day, at some point you can't give yourself everything you need. I'm pretty aware of that. Even that I try to ignore the fact over the past few years, because obviously I don't take the next best person that like cross my path. Even that I try to ignore the fact, you know it deep down, you know it, you're well aware of it. I was already quite comfortable with being alone before I left for Australia. I often reached my limits. Also because I just wanted to see how much further I could go. I realized how much pressure and weight can often rest on your shoulders without having anyone else there. At some point, it becomes normal. I realized that after such a journey, it's almost impossible to let go of that. As fulfilling as this life is in all its aspects, it also sometimes hurts. It hurts because you realize how alone you can actually be. In this intense life that I live, I often wonder if you need someone who truly understands you, or someone who's completely different, so you balance and enrich each other. But as long as there's no one there, you're there for yourself, and at a certain point it becomes hard to change that. I can open up to people. I just think not everyone knows how to handle it. That doesn't mean I don't do it, because that's exactly what life is for. To feel, to learn, maybe get hurt, but maybe also be surprised. And even though you never spend enough time in one place and people come and go, it is not impossible to build and maintain deep connections. You just have to use the time you have and want it. It might sound a bit cliche, but I believe people come into your life not when you expect, want, or need them to, but when you're ready for it. That was the first text. If you want to read the whole text, you're very welcome to it in my Instagram, in my thoughts, highlights. Obviously, you overcome down phases like those at some point. That was it with the episode. I hope you had an insight of like how I handle being alone and what I did. You're always happy, as I mentioned, to like message me. Instagram, Erna_AU, Soul Hugs Podcast, and everything is linked in my bio, website, YouTube, email list. You're very happy to like give me some feedback. I wish you a lovely day, wherever you are, whatever you do. maybe also a good night. And yeah, I see you soon in the next episode.